Kobayashi さんちのメイドラゴン炸裂チョロゴンブレス
Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, burst forth Choro-Gon breath, an anime side story shoot 'em up. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Kaminari Games and publisher Bushiroad, Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, Sakuretsu, released for the Nintendo Switch and the PlayStation 4 in March of 2022, although just in the Japanese region. This title is fully localized into English already, but at this point it does not have an international release date scheduled. There is one planned, but at this point it hasn't been revealed. So, if you're interested in playing this title, it's definitely an easy one to import, whether you want to pick up a physical one or pick it up on the Japanese PSN or the Japanese eShop. It's definitely one that has been a fun one for me to try, as I'm always up for these anime spin-off type shoot-em-ups, as the ones that have come out recently have actually been quite enjoyable, and this one is no exception. As far as the Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid series is concerned, I'm familiar with the franchise, but I haven't watched the anime or read any of the manga, so this really is my introduction to the series, and I kind of feel like if you are more familiar with it, you get that much more out of it, but this game is still decent even without having that background. So that said, let's dive into the game itself and see what we have here, as it actually has a fair bit of content to it. So for one thing, I do love these transition screens, that one in particular, since it's so bright and full of color, and that's one thing I enjoy about this game, is it's actually got some really nice visuals to it. So here's the main menu, and there's actually quite a bit here. So under the gameplay, we have a few different options for how to explore the game. In addition to that, though, we have this collection, and this is where a lot of your replayability is going to come from, as there's a ton here, especially in the top two categories. But so we've got those memory pieces, treasure, gallery, and character, which has character profiles, a good way to kind of get to know the characters if you're not familiar with them again. Ranking, so you've got online and offline, and then options. So the options were kind of important for me, as I wanted to change up the controls and the sound settings as well. And you also have some ways to make the game easier or harder for yourself under the game setting. One thing to note is there were some issues I feel with the sound balance in the game itself, as well as with the controls. So this game does have a demo, at least on the Nintendo Switch. I don't know about the PlayStation 4, so you can check it out that way if you have a Japanese eShop account. So starting the game, we're taken to this sub-menu here, and here we can access the tutorial, which will be shown to you the first time you play the game regardless, but then we can also select our difficulty, ranging anywhere from practice up to extreme. We'll select easy. Then we've got this risk rate. So throughout the course of the game, you can collect treasure from the various stages, and if you set this risk rate higher, more treasure will show up, but there will be certain penalties involved. So you'll be able to get a higher score, but you'll take more damage, and your combo timer won't last as long. Things like that. You can also select which of the three characters you play as is your starting character, but those characters will always be available for the most part. And there's also a short description of some of the differences between them there in the bottom left. That stuff is important to take into account. So you've got Toru, you've got Elma, and you've got Kana. So of course we'll start with the default Toru. And then last we've got this play demo. So this is basically turning on or off story mode. So with this off, we'll just transition between the stages rather than having the story mode present. For our purposes of showing off the game today, that's ideal. So from the stage select, once you start the game, you can actually play the first 3 stages of this game, and it has a total of 6 stages, something to keep in mind, in any order you would like. So we'll just start with the default order, the first stage, stage 1, Fin Fantasy. So throughout the course of your transitions, you will get some useful tips about the game, and once again, you can see this game is fully localized into English. Although the voice acting is still the Japanese, all the controls and the dialogue are translated, so definitely, like I said, this one is an easy import. So this is a fairly straightforward vertical scroller in that we have the ability to move around the screen in that way, And we also have, for attacks, each character has a primary and secondary shot, which are on the same button. So Toru here is a straight shot character. You can go move back and forth in a left and right fashion to the other characters. So we'll move on next to Kana, and Kana has this homing shot. In addition to that, her secondary shot are these short-range feathers she fires in front of her that will turn enemy shots into shots fired back at those same enemies. And last, but definitely not least, we have Elma. So Elma has this spread shot. In addition to that, she also creates these target-like spots up towards the top of the screen, and if enemies touch those, they'll take damage from those circles as well. It is possible to level up the character's shots. So in the top right there, you see that there's that meter there, referred to as the dragon eye. As you hit enemies and defeat them, that gauge, let's see, fills up, and it can go up several levels, which can make our characters quite a bit stronger. But on the lower difficulty levels, you're not going to be hitting as many enemies, so it takes a while to build that up. The characters have a life meter rather than lives, so you can go and take multiple hits, and it's possible to set that at higher percentages or lower percentages, making things easier or more difficult for you. But here we find ourselves at the first boss, and this gives us a good opportunity to talk about some of the other mechanics the game has. So it's possible to use basically melee attacks against enemies, called the striking blows. So you can either do that as just a tap, where you'll rush in, and there's actually kind of some neat sound effects that are played when you do so. But it's also, you can also charge that up for big damage. And the three characters have different values associated to how much damage they deal. So Elma is the strongest when it comes to the physical, whereas shot-wise, Toru is the strongest. And then Kana's special abilities is the fact that her shot is homing, and her Choro-Gon breath also heals her, which we haven't gotten to yet. But the Choro-Gon breath is this here. It's basically this massive bomb that all three of the characters have. They're basically these dragons, and when you use your bomb, they transform into the dragon form and, well, blow away the enemy. Once again, the strength of that attack is determined by which character you are. Toru here is definitely the strongest as far as her attack is concerned. You also get that neat sound effect, wham! So all the bosses in the game do have 3 phases, and we've entered the 3rd phase. So there's also one last power-up mechanic. Let's see if I can trigger that. Yep. So this is called the Raging Spark. So when a character gets hit, or some other they'll sometimes activate Raging Spark, and in that they're more powerful for a short period of time. You'll see this kind of fire-like glow coming from the character. And in that time, you'll be able to go and deal additional damage to the enemy. We'll finish off the boss here, Scarlet Olsen, and then we'll move on to our stage result. So the game does have some clothing destruction, which you see when the Raging Spark was activated, and whichever character you're at, that level of clothing destruction will be displayed when you get to the stage results. Once again, it's a kind of a bout like this, maybe just a little bit more revealing if the character was fully damaged. Something to keep in mind if that's not necessarily your jam. But we can also go and see some important things here. So throughout the course of the game, rather stage, we're collecting both puzzle pieces as well as treasure for the stage. And the treasure is just these neat little items we can pick up that have descriptions that are just fun to read. As the Memoria pieces, though, will ultimately fill out these illustrations and have these mini dramas that we can listen to once you've completed an illustration. Moving on back to our stage select, we'll move on to the next stage, the Sugar Sports, to just kind of continue showing off the game itself. So those are the basic mechanics that we have for the gameplay. But one thing to note is throughout the course of your game, unless you happen to continue, the character health will be persistent. So you can see there in the top left, Elma in particular took a fair bit of damage against that boss fight. I wasn't paying as much attention to dodging as I should have. But if they're the resting character, basically they're not your active character, they will slowly recover HP. So that's a great way to keep the character going. Although one thing to note, if you lose all the HP with the character, that character will be unavailable until you continue or game over. Something to keep in mind. So you might have been like noticing that there's some like character chatter going on in the background. Well, one thing to note is I felt when I initially fired up the game, the balance of the audio was really off, as the volume. Oh, this taiyaki here will fully heal up your character. If you're not familiar with taiyaki, it's basically kind of like a sweet Japanese like pastry, usually with red bean paste filling that's shaped like a fish. And it's actually really good, so I recommend trying it if you've never have. Anyway, where was I? The sound balance. So Kana in particular, her shot is extremely loud. So much so that I had to, in order to get what I felt was a good balance in the sound, I had to increase the volume of the voices, lower the volume of the sound effects, and I kind of left the music where it was at, as I felt like that one was about appropriate. So it's just weird that the balance was a little bit off. Anyway, we find ourselves fighting the second boss, Catalina von Slice the 11th. Wonderful name. There's a little bit of a description for the bosses as well in your in the collections part of the game under the character profiles. So, hey, that's fun. Let's go ahead and switch to Elma for this one. We'll kind of like take on this boss with like physical attacks. So moving on to the second phase, I kind of feel like Toru is actually the better call for this one, as the boss is taking on a smaller form. This attack's actually a pretty fun one to try and dodge. Just have to kind of like move around and like lead these particular blobous shots that are coming your way. So there we have it. That's basically your core gameplay for Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. The title itself, I feel like, is a decent vertical scrolling shoot 'em up, but there's more to it, and let's dive back to the main menu so I can kind of show off just a little bit about that before we call it a video. So here under the collection menu, we can take a little bit of a look at some of what I was talking about as far as how much there is to collect. So in the Memoria pieces, we can see all these various illustrations that the game has. So you kind of like jump through them like 5 at a time, and there's a ton here. One thing that's really nice is it does tell you which stages you can collect the pieces in, so there's no guessing that way. But you're going to be like playing through the game several times. You can only get 3 pieces per stage, and for a total of like 18 in a full run. If you were to get like stages, and there's no guarantees you're going to get through all 3 in a particular stage, but if you can see down at the bottom, there's 288 total pieces. It's going to take a long time to fill this all out, and even with the number of times I've played through the game, I've only completed 1 illustration to this point. So there's that. There's also the treasure itself, and under here you've got like all these different completion rates for those like little treasures, which are just things like this withered mandrake. Or we can go over to this like Tachyon Blaze, the sci-fi stage, and you've got things like this bounty hunter's hat, there's this thunder cider, and they've got just some like fun descriptions there, and you can end up collecting multiple, so it might take a while of the same thing, so it might take a while to actually complete all of this. So for some replayability though, at the same time, that could cause some issues, is the game is only 6 stages long, and you're going to be replaying these stages a lot to get everything. So if you're looking to kind of shortcut that, one thing you can do is use the stage exploration. Under this menu, you'll be able to select any of the stages. So in this case, we're going to jump to that sci-fi stage, Tachyon Blaze. We'll go with the same settings for the rest of it and dive in that way. So I haven't really touched on the story, but I feel like this game is a really good side story to the what would be the main stories of the series. And this is just kind of, once again, like just my feeling on it being like this is my introduction to Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. But basically the story is that the characters were visiting a friend who happened to have like this computer that's cursed, and basically drew all the characters into this cursed computer. So now in order to get out, they have to defeat all the games that were on this computer, and that's why we find ourselves in stages that are kind of like cute Mario Kart-esque stage, or a fantasy stage, or a sci-fi shoot 'em up. Since that's like the whole point of the story. So as far as the minus flavors are concerned with this game, so one of the big worries I have with it is that because there is so much to collect from it, you're just going to get burned out playing through the same 6 stages over and over and over again to complete all of that. And like, say for the most dedicated of completionists, I don't feel like most players are going to go to that level to complete all the illustrations and see everything that this game has to offer. It would have been nice if there was a little bit more variety to what's on offer, just so we could more easily enjoy the experience of grinding for what's present throughout the course of the game. Then there's also just those issues I had with like sound balance initially, but you can kind of like fix that with just a little bit of experimenting and setup on your end. And then as far as the plus flavors are concerned, so I feel like, especially if you're a fan of this franchise, this is just a really like a cute and enjoyable like anime spin-off or side story experience, wrapped in a pretty solid vertical scrolling shoot 'em up. It doesn't go and break any like new and impressive ground. It's pretty much your standard vertical scroller, but for the most part, like sometimes that's just what you want. And like that said, I thought this was an enjoyable experience, so it definitely earns a recommend from the chef. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have yourself a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.
欲しいですね。